everybody. It's Dr. Doug Pernikoff and my wonderful co-host, Cindy Vickers, and we are here to discuss today, on behalf of Dr. Doug's All Things Animal radio show, we're going to discuss unusual pets in the home. This is a very, very interesting topic, very controversial, and we have some special guests. We have a wonderful good friend, Paul Flotron, who has been raising and working with all kinds of animals in his entire life, both domestic and non-domestic, and right now is really into cockatoos, which is a type of exotic parrot bird. And then we have over to my right another beautiful guest, Texanne McBride, and she's been involved with primates in her home for many, many years, and maybe other animals I'm not aware of. So we thought we would start. I wanted to tell you a little bit about how I define some of these unusual pets. You know, the typical pet is a dog or cat. Now, more and more in captivity, we see pocket pets, which are the rats, rodents, things like this, rabbits, guinea pigs, and those are great animals, and we'll explain why. But they used to be much more unusual. Now we have animals like ferrets that are considered more commonplace in the pet house, although they are definitely a non-domestic, kind of an unusual pet. And we have animals that are called exotics or zoo kind of animals. These might be the snakes and the birds and things like that. Super exotics are animals like tigers, lions, bears, oh my. So the controversy comes in three categories, and that's number one, public safety, and animal welfare. And those are the three areas that arguments are drawn from. And I thought what we'd do is we'd start with some questions to our special guests, because they are obviously people that have been committed to this. And I don't know, Cindy, I'm sure you've been around a lot of crazy animals too, but I too have been born and raised loving the circus and all the animals you're exposed to, and loving going to the zoo as a little kid. I couldn't wait to get to the prairie dog area of the St. Louis Zoo and just watch them because they were so interesting. So do you have any questions you want to start with?
Well, I've got quite a few things that I want to talk about, but for Texanne and for Paul, maybe you could just start by, Texanne, I don't really know what creatures live in your home. I think there's monkeys. What kind of monkeys?
She doesn't know either, actually.
Well, and why would you? This is what I'd like to know. What made you choose to have whatever kind of monkeys you have, and what are the the challenges of having them?
It's a lot of responsibility when you decide to raise monkeys. You're giving up your freedom. Dr. Doug knows, because when I have to travel for business and stuff, sometimes my monkeys go stay with him, and sometimes I have a babysitter come in. So there's
but the attention is, and the commitment is forever.
It is. It's like having a 2-year-old. The only difference is I can cage my 2-year-old and not go to jail.
Do you have one monkey, 2 monkeys?
I had
monkeys?
2. I lost one 3 weeks ago.
Oh, darn it.
Yeah.
Sorry. What kind of monkeys? Like, how big are they?
Capuchins, black-cap capuchins. So Stitch, I overfeed. And so he was quite large. They're usually 6 to 9 pounds, and he was 14.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, I overfeed. And my little girl, she's average, so she's about 7 pounds. Dr. Doug and I rescued her, and she came to live with me about 1.5 years ago, and she has really flourished. She's a totally different monkey now than when I first got her, because she has the love and attention, and I'm really good with training them. And
yeah, I think the commitment goes beyond just having a place for them. Mm-hmm. I think it goes, most of these animals, like you're talking about, the primates, can live 20, 30 plus years. So it's not just like, most dogs and cats, if you're lucky, you'll get close to that, but it's not commonplace. And birds, Paul, they can theoretically live to be 70 plus years, they say. And I have tortoises, so I know that's the same game. In fact, I put my tortoise Dewey in my will, because there's got to be a place for him. And he's 23 years old, and he's not even sexually mature yet. He'll be sexually mature at 30, so he's got his whole life before him.
But just really quick before we get on to the birds, there's got to be reasons why you would not recommend a monkey for people other than the fact that they are a time commitment. And I'm not saying that people might not want one, and maybe they would be a good choice, but it's.
Well, I mean, you have other costs. Let's go over.
What about like running, through your house and?
Well, some
They
people
do.
can do that. Yeah,
They do that.
Yeah, but at the same time, you have to have some degree of control, and there are situations where you have to be able to commit to pretty nice housing, reasonable housing, and I'm sure that you're aware of this experience,
Yes, I
and you
have
are too
huge
with your
cages,
birds.
and so you have to have a place that'll accommodate the huge cage and
And keep
the,
it safe.
The cost of just raising them. When I had both of them, I spent over $300 a week in food,
Wow.
See, I think that's really important for people.
just in food.
To know.
Yeah, the same
Plus
thing
the
with
vet bills. When Stitch got sick 7 years ago,
yeah.
he was sick for 7 years. We were able to keep him alive, but you're talking shots and medication, and he was diabetic, so he got
Yeah,
two
but
shots
make it
insulin
sound
a
like
day.
it was a great deal.
You were. You took very good care of both of us. I mean, you did. I mean, there's no way I could have kept him alive for 7 years if it wasn't for you.
Right.
Just because of your commitment. I mean, I would have to call him in the middle of the night. Stitch can't breathe, and we'd be down there, and I'd sleep on the surgery floor with Stitch on
I kept
oxygen.
hoping she
and-
would call me in the middle of the night, but she never did, really.
Oh, it just took a dive. You're doing so well.
So there is, a lot of expense just in food.
Right.
And,
Well, that's the thing that always gets me, even with dogs and cats. People grab these animals impulsively. They're cute. I mean, example, a baby monkey or a baby
adorable.
exotic cat or a baby bird. There's nothing cuter. But then all of a sudden you realize, hey, they're growing up. They're costing me a ton of money. And then when something has to be done that's important for their well-being, either their emotional or their physical health, people kind of say, well, I don't have the money for that. Well, why weren't you responsible
Right.
to do your due diligence and understand the commitment you were getting into?
Well, you know why? Well, I can't speak for everybody, but here's just a tiny little baby example. When my youngest son was small, we were going for a walk, and there on the sidewalk is this little tiny baby squirrel. I don't know how the little tiny baby squirrel got there, but we went by it once, then we went by it again. I thought, I can't leave this here. So I pick it up and I bring it home, and I try to put it in a box and put it in front of the heater, and I have no idea. I'm trying to look up what you do with it, and I think I eventually called the Wildlife Center. There's a name, that's not the right
One
name.
of the rescue programs.
Yeah, and it's just because you can't bear to see them just there and suffer, so that could be a reason. But, I actually looked up things about squirrels, and you can't, I told you this, you can't feed a cold squirrel. They can't digest the food if they're cold. Their body temperature
Any
has to
animal,
be
really, like any baby animal, or if they get too cold, trying to stuff down their throat isn't going to work.
Well, I mean, if your house is 78 degrees, this has to be 98 to 102 degrees. They will die if you give them cow's milk.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's also a lot to know, like you were saying, about due diligence. It's just sometimes the impulse is just because you're like, oh, I just don't want something bad to happen. But yet now you really don't have any idea how to care for them.
Well, I think exotic animal owners can be their own worst enemy because there's so much legislation that's being pressed against them from keeping these. But, they're not always responsible to that. Understanding, they think if I hide and keep my animal under cover and no one's going to bother me, I don't care what happens to the next person. But the reality is, whatever happens to one owner is going to impact the rest of the owners. And it really requires that you're very, very responsible to your effort. I was going to throw in a few more statistics that I thought were really amazing. So in the United States alone, and this is 2015-2016 by the National Pet Owners Society, has a statistical survey, and they're actually right now estimated to be between 14 and 17 million pet birds in the U.S. in homes, private homes, about 100 million or more tropical fish, which is amazing. Reptiles about 9.3 million, and other small mammals, which are probably the little pocket pets I was talking about, and others 12.4. But another interesting point is that animals, endangered species like tigers, there are more than 7,000 tigers in captivity in the U.S. alone, and there's less than that in the wild throughout Asia in their natural setting. So you can see it's really distorted. Same thing with antelope, wild antelope on these hunting ranches in Texas. There are many more there on these farms and ranches than there are in the wild anymore. Over 10,000 to 20,000 total exotic cats in captivity, and it's just 3,000 great apes. I mean, it's crazy numbers. And the problem is there's no place for them to go back in the wild, so you can't reintroduce them.
Once you've had them in the home, so many
Right.
people buy primates, and they paid $9,000
Right.
for a primate, and then they don't realize it needs a lot of shots, just like the same shots a baby gets.
Right.
And so you have that cost, and then the feeding, and then this. And so now this poor primate's used to you and your family, and they're like, oh, I can't afford it, I don't want it anymore. So the primates are getting passed down from home to home to home,
Right.
and they're charging rehoming fees, to try and recover some of their money and stuff. And it's just ruining it for everybody.
Right, right. And the legislation is getting tougher on all exotics, but there are federal laws that have to do with endangered species like great apes and some of the big cats and stuff. So those are controlled by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service or other federal agencies. You have state conservation and other state USDA and federal USDA that have to manage these animals. And then locally, you have to have permits sometimes, depending if you're in St. Louis County versus in Jefferson County. You're going to have different law structures that are going to impact you.
You cannot legally transfer ownership either.
You mean for exotics?
In
A
Missouri.
USDA
Yeah.
person can.
I think you can, because I've worked with groups that have done that.
And
You
there
can't-
are rescues.
Yeah, there are rescue
There
groups.
are rescues.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, for big cats, there's Crown Ridge Tiger Sanctuary in St.
Right.
Genevieve, Missouri.
Right.
I
know
used
what-
to do big cat rescue. I had a cougar living in the house, and we used to tell Texanne Jr., don't run, you look like lunch.
I've got a
You
cougar
know.
working for me right now.
That's another story.
That's another story. Yeah.
You have to tell that one off the air.
Tell us a little bit about your bird experience. Well, you have a lot of other experience in your life, I know.
I do. When I was a kid growing up, I had my own little miniature zoo. I had reptiles, I had caiman crocodiles, and I had snakes and all kinds of different animals. But for over 24 years, I've had exotic parrots, exotic birds. And my first bird was a yellow-nape Amazon named Dudley. And basically, Dudley was originally from a well-known, prominent family in St. Louis. There was kind of a tragedy and needed to find a good home. And so I take a real responsibility, because I think the human species really, I think I could say, admires the idea of flight, having the ability to fly. We have planes, and the Wright brothers, for instance. So I do have them in cages. So I think that the fact that they're in cages, they don't have the ability to fly like in their natural habitat, an ability that we ourselves have difficulty to recreate. I take that responsibility very seriously, so I purchase all these perch stands and play gyms, parrot play gyms, so they can have
We call that
time
enrichment.
outside.
Yeah.
Exactly, so they can have an enrichment and a rich life, or rich, happy lives.
Well, even zoos are required by their own agency. The American Zoological Association demands and grades one another, the zoos, to make sure they have enough enrichment. And of course, it depends on the animal. Sometimes enrichment is just having a proper housing environment.
Yeah.
So if it's a reptile, it's kind of primitive, but they want to have some sense of being comfortable and familiar so they can hide or look for sun or whatever. But then you get up into the elephants or the other super exotics, the chimps. They definitely need, or even your primates, need a lot of different special attention. Not unlike dogs and cats, but the enrichment's really important. You like to have the apes and the monkeys allowed to kind of forage for things like they would in the wild. So you can put a bedding down and allow them to kind of explore for opportunities, find little food bits and
Yeah, I
stuff like that.
put things all over the house and stuff, and she finds and forages, and in a controlled.
Well, I think the
atmosphere.
level of intelligence both birds and primates have, birds, for example, have been studied by many years by researchers, and they've concluded that they do have cognitive ability. They do have a level of intelligence that's comparable to chimpanzees, dolphins, porpoises, 5 or 6 year old human children. So,
But what's the real purpose for having these kind of animals in your home?
well, I sure don't dolphin know. I don't.
So it seems like the ones we're talking about are animals that require even more work. Well, maybe not a bird, but then having a dog and cat. But I think some of the other animals are, people like the idea of having an animal, but they don't want to.
The reality
care.
of it, yeah.
So then there's things like, reptiles that require less daily care, and you can walk away from them, and
Sure.
frogs and what about like sugar gliders? That's like my.
I'll tell you what, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll pick up right there with Cindy and her sugar gliders.
All right, cool.
Okay? Great topics. Good going.
Look for the bare necessities, the simple bare necessities. Forget about your worries and your strife.
Well, welcome back, everybody. This is Dr. Doug Pernikoff and Cindy Vickers from Dr. Doug's All Things Animal radio show. And again, our topic this morning is about unusual pets in the home. We have two wonderful guests, Paul Flotron and Texanne McBride. They're here with us because of their own personal experiences with different kind of unusual pets, not the typical dog and cat or husband sometimes. So, when we left just a second ago, Cindy was asking about, was it ferrets? Oh, no, sugar gliders, right?
Well, just other pets that people would have. Monkeys and primates, very high maintenance. Obviously very. Most people are not going to choose a lion or a cougar or something to have, and plus they could barely manage to feed them. But I know nothing about sugar gliders, although I was at somebody's home once that had them, and I know that they do transport like they do with other rescue animals, where if they have to go across the country, they'll create this chain of people that can transport the sugar gliders. But I thought it was so cool. They're crazy cute little
Marsupials. So they have pockets just like a kangaroo or a possum here in the United States. So they're part of the kangaroo family, believe it or not. But they're closer in anatomy and the way they live like a flying squirrel.
Yeah, they look like a little teeny tiny chipmunk or something. And they literally, this one was perched up on a shelf or something that was probably 7-8 feet high, and it literally just floated down and came to the people who owned it. It was so dang cute. I don't want one, but
I want to ask Texanne a question. As a veterinarian, I worry about what we call zoonotic diseases, or disease elements that can transfer back and forth between humans and animals, or animals and humans. And of course, you have primates, which are so much closer. And I know what we do to try and protect you and owners, but do you think about that? I mean, if you got bit, or do you worry that you might be exposed to something?
I never have. I had a macaque once, and they talk about them carrying herpes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I never even thought about it with them, but they test them, and I think there's one reported case, but in the last 50 years or something.
Well, in private homes, but
right.
It's called monkey bee virus, and it is a type of herpes virus in old world monkeys like macaques, and 80% of humans that contract it, like mostly in laboratories, they die. It's really a nasty disease. So, but you don't see it so much.
Yeah, you don't.
I haven't seen it in 36 years. I've never seen it. In one case in Texas, there was a farm that had a number of macaques from clinical research, and they had that disease in their group, and told them to be careful, explained to them. But some people you can't preach to.
Right.
But now,
I've had monkeys for 30 years, and I've never caught anything.
What's that lesion on your face?
That's just natural.
Oh, okay, nothing. Okay. and Paul, one of the most common diseases we hear about in birds is parrot fever, or psittacosis, which is a chlamydial disease, and all kinds of chlamydia affect all kinds of species, humans as well. Like pink eye is typically in children is a chlamydial disease, but there are other ones as well. So have you ever had any concerns or come across any issues?
I have not, and actually my birds in particular, thanks to Dr. Doug as well. I owe thanks to the vet, the wonderful vet here. No, my birds have never been sick, so in the 24 years. But Yes, that's always a concern, but there has not been any issues there. So,
Well, Cindy, did you know that one of the big reasons people are concerned about other animals like pet rodents or more commonly turtles and tortoises, one of the most common disease issues they have is salmonella or Salmonella shigella, some other ones, Campylobacter. These are all the kind of diarrheal causing diseases that can transfer, or E. coli bacteria, all kinds of other protozoan that can transfer back and forth, like Giardia. These are things you can get from your pets. Of course, the pets can get it from the humans too, so it's a two-way street. But
Not just dogs and people. You're talking about it could be.
Yeah, anything.
Can a mouse get Giardia?
No, but for example, a pet raccoon that has a worm called Balis ascaris, it's a roundworm, but it's a problem in wild state because they poop in the sand yard and stuff like that, and the little kids are in there playing. This particular parasite in its abnormal host outside the raccoon can actually migrate through the body, but it doesn't have the signals in the human or in the dog, and it can cause serious brain disease in those particular species, and children in particular. Is really scary.
So you're saying don't let the kids play in the woods?
You're not supposed to play in the sandbox without washing up real well, because they don't know when they're going to get exposed to that.
It means something specifically about sand?
Well, they like the raccoons will go and use it like a litter box.
Oh.
So the poopy is there. And of course, pregnant women are supposed to stay away from even domestic cats because of toxoplasmosis, which is a protozoan that they deposit in their poop. So those are all the kind of issues. I know, in fact, someone told me a story about goats in petting zoos that actually carry a bacteria that causes ulcers. And, you know, how many kids are exposed to those kind of animals?
I love the goats.
Can't they be tested?
They can be, but you have to know to think about it. These are things that just evolve, and they find a simple issue someplace, and then all of a sudden they work it up. So they have to have an impetus or a stimulus to spend the money to do the follow-ups.
Well, I hope they do that at Grant's Farm, because I've petted
we have a
lot
of
of
goats.
Yeah.
They're so cute.
And we do a lot of testing for reptiles. Like we'll test for salmonella. If there's an animal that's in one of these education programs, like an iguana, we want to make sure that the children that are being exposed are safe. So let me ask you each, how many hours, you know, in your free time, what percentage of your free time do you find yourself hanging with your pets versus doing something else socially, like being with human beings? And I'm really worried about Paul in this regard.
Yeah, well, I parrot what they do, so, you know.
Yeah. I get it. But what time? I mean, you're busy, but
I am very busy, you know, with my business. But I would say on the average, it could be anywhere from 2 to 4 hours plus.
Wow.
I try, you know, to really devote as much time because, you know, again, I think it's a real responsibility, you know, because yes, they have such creative, I think, souls, intelligence, and I think they deserve. I don't have any children, and they're my feathered children. They're the Flotron feathered family, so I need to be a good dad.
that's why we're worried about you, Paul.
I know. I worry about myself sometimes.
And birds are very teachable. I mean, you can teach
they
them. Well, any being with a brain is teachable.
And I've taken them out into the community, and
I know you use them for education.
Use them for education. I take them to nursing homes and schools, and try to kind of share what my experience has been with them, and it's been a wonderful experience.
I want to ask Cindy, what's the difference? Can you define the difference between teach and train? Because we don't typically use the word teach with animals, do we? Or is that okay in the training sphere?
To say teach?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so you don't differentiate?
No.
Okay. I think if you talk to a human child instructor, they might differentiate, but I don't know what it would be.
I probably would.
I was in the classroom last year, I think, and the teacher told a story about she's got a ferret, and she told a story about having a ferret. This is like the third grade classroom, and you can't like swear actually in class. I mean, that's really frowned upon, by the school administration. But the ferret was brand new, and it bit her finger, and it shocked her so much, and it was holding on, and she was like, "Oh," and she flung her hand out because it hurt, but the ferret was hanging on.
Let me bleep that. Bleep.
The poor ferret goes flying across the classroom. So here she is with the third grade. First, she just swore like really, really loud. Then she threw the ferret across the classroom, not on purpose.
Been there, done that.
And then she had to try to fix all that. I mean, I laughed so hard I couldn't stand it.
I want to ask Texanne with her particular pets, and that's another word. Some people don't like us to call these animals pets, these unusual animals.
Animal companions.
Animal companions. But, can you mention one or two really special moments where you saw something almost human or, that really just makes you think twice about what the kind of animals you're working with in primates?
Well, Stitch, as you know, he said 5 words.
Yes.
He won second place on America's Funniest Home Videos in December 2015 for arguing with me. His favorite word was no, and he said it plain. He told you no.
Yeah.
So many times.
Did he say it at an appropriate time?
Oh yes, he knew what he was saying, and if I told him you're going to take this medicine and he didn't want to do it, it was no, and he was shaking his head, and I mean he knew what he was saying. And when I'd tell him he'd meet somebody new, because I take them out too, to meet people, and actually Stitch got 350 condolences when he passed away, and I don't know a human that would get that.
Did he have his own Facebook page?
No, he was always on mine.
Oh, okay.
And the United States Primates thing, they sent them all, and and everybody on Facebook, and he touched a lot of lives. He was incredible. So I'd say hi, he'd say hi. And, Paula, last night I decided I was going to teach her high five.
Yeah.
And she learned it in one night.
Seriously?
Just the second time. I was like, high five.
So you would say what to people? I mean, now that you've been through that experience real quickly, if you can summarize, what would you say to people that are talking about getting an exotic pet? Either one of you or both of you. Make a quick
I'd say don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I still will.
Yeah.
You and I are looking for another primate for me.
Right.
But I'm used to it. I've been doing it for 30 years. I don't recommend it to people when people go, "Oh, what is it like to own a monkey?" I'm like, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Most people don't want to devote that. I come home from work and it's all about the primates.
Right.
And, you got to have an understanding boss. When Stitch was sick, I missed a lot of work.
And an understanding spouse.
And an understanding vet.
Yeah,
when you
yeah.
call him all night,
Paul, do you have anything real quickly?
Yeah, I think it is a lifetime commitment, and we were talking about birds having such long lifespans. So I would say if you're prepared to take care of your human children, just as though they would be in diapers for their whole lives, I would say that may be a good fit. But otherwise, it's something to seriously consider.
Do you want to say?
I would just like to use your words about due diligence. I think you want to really consider, is this a quality life for this animal? Just because you really, really love them doesn't mean that you can't love a bird so much that you keep it in a little cage 24 hours a day and think that that's really a quality life. And then you also really need to seriously look at how much is this really going to cost me? Can I afford it?
Right.
And
how to be able to respond, in an emergency situation.
Yeah,
that's part of affording it, though. You have to say at least, counter or factor in some veterinary costs.
Issue,
the
right.
cages, the food, the vets.
Everything goes. We could talk for days on this subject, and I want to thank you guys. We're ending this particular section, but we'd love for you to stay if you have time. We're going to talk in a few moments about separation anxiety in pets. And I know Cindy's excited because she's a kind of trainer. This is one of her topics. So Dr. Doug's All Things Animal radio show will be back in just a moment. Thank you.
That's why a bear can rest at ease with just the bare necessities of life. Yeah, with just the bare necessities of life.
Everybody wants to be a cat. Hallelujah.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Dr. Doug Pernikoff and Cindy Vickers on Dr. Doug's All Things Animal radio show. We've just had a wonderful discussion, topic discussion with our guest regarding unfamiliar, unusual animals in your household. Now we're going to move on to something that a lot of pet owners have to deal with. At least I see a lot of issue in my veterinary clinic, people coming with questions about how to deal with a topic we call separation anxiety in pets. In particular, it usually refers to dogs and cats. I mean, dogs mostly, because, and you might, I'm going to let Cindy take over some of the symptoms, but there are a number of symptoms you can look for. There are a number of conditions. Maybe you can help us understand why it can happen. And then maybe Paul can chime in, because he does a lot of kind of house sitting and pet sitting, so he has to deal with a lot of animals that are particularly being separated from their home, their families. Cindy, can you explain a little bit more about what it is exactly when we talk about?
Well, there are levels of separation anxiety, but generally when you really need to interfere is when it's the most extreme, and you'll have a dog that is going to probably be very destructive in your presence. But one of the ways that you kind of know this is separation anxiety is not just it's not just that they're whining and a little distressed when you're gone. They're usually you're hyper drooling, hyper salivating, and you could come home to, if the dog is even in their crate and has not escaped, they're soaking wet.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes there's just the peeing and pooping everywhere, and if that doesn't happen in your presence but only happens when you're not gone, it may be something that's linked to separation anxiety. I have known dogs
I guess
that
my father had separation anxiety when he was 97.
Oh, God.
He
Well, he
did all
probably
those things.
did. He probably did. I've known of dogs that have eaten an entire sheet of drywall, have completely destroyed a place. Dogs, you're thinking there's no way they could break out of this crate. They break out of the crates and destroyed rooms. And especially you'll see the couch by the window and any covering that's on the window. So, but a big one is the unbelievable destruction and that hypersalivating. Those are ways that you really know.
So let me ask you, what do you think are some of the causes? What predisposes a particular animal to become or go through this kind of syndrome? Is it the way rescue versus, captive born and managed? I don't know. What are the different issues?
The evidence is not very clear about that, but some of it could be due to trauma, where the trauma within the animal's mind is associated with being, left alone for a long time, or perhaps something even happened when they were left alone.
I see.
But in other cases, just have no idea what causes it. I don't know. I can't think of a time, at least in my personal experience, where somebody raised a dog from a puppy who had a problem with it, though.
See, I read about things like young couple gets a puppy. They're both working in these days, and that can predispose a puppy to being anxious or having this anxiety. But you don't think that's a direct correlation?
I'm really saying I don't know. I haven't personally seen it. It's usually that something happened, but I don't know what it was that happened, and now somebody rescued a dog or got a dog that's older that has it. But then it's, what do you do? Really the question is, what do you do if they have it? And it depends upon the level of the separation anxiety. But I have had some pretty good success dealing with dogs that have separation anxiety, but it's quite a bit of work on the owner's part. And the number one protocol, which is absurd, is that the dog should not be left alone until you can work through that. Well, that's absolutely an impossible thing to do.
You got to live your life.
Yeah. I mean, you can't not ever leave.
Right.
But you can't also ever leave the dog so that their anxiety level rises to their extreme level while you're trying to work on the separation anxiety, or it undoes the training. So you have to handle this in these little baby increments, and then I would say talk to your vet, and I really think that the dog needs to be medicated when you are gone until you have reached the level where they don't need the medication. So you really would medicate and then wean them off the medication. And this is a really simple thing. This is the number one first thing that I do. And it's, first of all, I think the dog should have basic training, because I think that basic training creates an atmosphere with the dog that sort of raises their confidence, their self-esteem. Like they really understand, when you do this, this thing will happen, and it's a good thing. So that sets them up to be more confident rather than, I'm not sure, I'll just, I'll go around testing things, but I'm not sure what the outcome would be. It's like, when I say sit, you sit, and then I tell you what a good dog you are. I tell you to lay down, I tell you what a good dog you are. And then the first exercise is practicing downstays, and then you going out of sight.
I was trained the same way. I was a good dog. And my mother would always tell me if I did things right, good dog, good dog.
But when you leave him alone, he still goes potty all over the house.
Paul, let me ask you, Paul. I want to ask Paul because he has to go into new homes all the time, and you have to see pets, and then you have to be responsible for their happiness. So
Yes.
what do you think about when you present one?
Well, what I first try to kind of get an overall assessment and kind of get a sense for, maybe are there any specific triggers that are triggering or causing that kind of anxiety, and beyond the obvious, just somebody being away from them and them being isolated, and sometimes to counter that, I'll put together simple remedies like putting the TV on or putting some background music on. Maybe that can serve as maybe companionship. There are foraging toys and mind-stimulating toys, and there's a Star Mark treat ball that's excellent. I think it's great. That has this fantastic tasting. I haven't tasted it personally, but I'm sure somebody along the way. But there are ways to counter it.
But if you come into a new home and let's say they haven't traveled much and left the pets, and now they're going to start leaving the pets, and you don't always stay overnight. Sometimes you just come in on scheduled visits.
Multiple visits.
Do you find, is there some kind of, trigger that's going to make a particular animal kind of be more sensitive to being alone than another? And do the parents even know that there might be a problem like that?
They'll sometimes, through the course of the meet and greet and the consultations, we exchange information and get a little more understanding as to what the dog's history has been. And I'm able to kind of get some insights and understanding as to the dog's psyche and mindset. And maybe the dog in particular likes to run a lot, exercise. It's an athletic dog. And I try to treat the dog out to parks. And then that way that will get them relaxed, more or less, and able to...
So you're just giving them an activity level.
Give them activity level to keep them busy. Again, there's puzzle toys. There's all kinds of different foraging toys, puzzle toys to keep the mind stimulated, the dog's mind stimulated. So there's ways to work around that. And if I get an understanding if the dog has been socialized well, if maybe I can possibly bring some other dogs to introduce to that same dog and do it slowly and be very conservative in the approach, of course, and with somebody else to assist. But in that process, there's an opportunity to kind of reduce that separation anxiety.
I guess you wouldn't know if it had separation anxiety until you were gone.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. I think that those are all wonderful
Sure,
things to
but
do, but if the dog has if the dog has true separation anxiety, the protocol is a lot more stringent than that, because it wouldn't help them if they really have separation anxiety. And so sometimes they're really not happy, and they just need some things to entertain them and soothe them, or just wear them out, but not with that high level of separation anxiety. And there is, when you start to leave the dog, you literally leave them for 1 or 2 seconds, and then you come back, and then it grows into 1 or 2 minutes, and then it grows into something bigger than that. But in the meantime, I think it's really important to talk to your vet. There's one medication that they get a lot that I've seen has not been effective, but Benadryl has. And so if the dog can be crated, but they're really just really sleepy enough that they're just comfortable in their crate, then they can have the experience of not freaking out in their crate or wherever or behind a baby gate, but it's because they're medicated, and then they can start to see, oh, nothing terrible happened, they came back and then everything was fine, and then nothing terrible happened, they came back and everything was fine. So when you're with them, you start these baby times of being away, starting with, like I said, a downstay where you just literally put yourself out of sight, to leaving for 1 or 2 seconds, to go to minutes, to go to half an hour,
Right.
and it's very gradual. So that's why it's trying. But before they get to the point where they sort of go, oh, I'm not going to die, they really come back, I'm okay. You pretty much have to keep them medicated,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
And I think that's a good point. As a veterinarian, we do work with trainers and behavioral modification trainers like this that for a short time, maybe it might be only 3 to 6, 9 months at the most, we might be using medications. There's a whole school of medications you can talk to your veterinarian about in conjunction with training, and then we work away the medicines and let the training and hopefully the owners continue with that kind of opportunity. How about with your primates? Can you give us
Well, when Stitch passed away, I was worried about this with Paula. And, because I left with Stitch and then I came home no Stitch. And she acted kind of weird. And she was actually angry, I think, with me for a few days. But I wouldn't leave for very long, because I was home off work for a little bit after he passed away, like 4 or 5 days. And so I'd leave maybe to go to the store and come back, and she seemed anxious and stuff. But now she's coming out of it. And but she's in a huge, huge cage. And she did get out once. Remember I called you freaking out? I was scared.
Yeah.
She undid a screw all day long and got out while I went to the store.
Wow,
I wasn't
that's
even
excellent.
gone that long, but she just all day long with one screw, and
Brilliant.
until she got a door off, one of those, and she was out. And I walked in, and I thought, well, who's been here? There's an energy drink all over the floor and everything. And all of a sudden, I see her walk across there, and she sees me, and she's like, oh, uh-oh.
back in the cage?
Wow, that's cool, really.
Well, that's a great topic too, and again, we could make a whole show just out of this topic of separation anxiety as kind of an abnormal behavior. I just want to thank everybody again, and we're going to move on to another segment, our final segment in review, and we'll be back with the audience in just a moment.
Everybody wants to be a cat, yeah.
Welcome back to our final segment, our recap segment. It's Dr. Doug's All Things Animal radio show with, again, a special guest today. I want to thank Paul Flotron and Texanne McBride, who shared information about their unusual pets, and my wonderful co-host, Cindy, who guided our training component part and separation anxiety subject. She's always great with all those topics.
We didn't talk about wolf hybrids. We have to do that.
Can we do it another time?
We can do it another time.
Okay, good, because she's
It's a big subject.
Cindy's got a very big issue about wolf hybrids.
I do. I have
think
concerns.
it was a bad date in high school. So it was a real wolf,
Turned
right?
into a
Hey, they
American
can't
wolf
see my
dog.
expression on the radio. I just wish
That's
that
the
they
beauty of
could.
radio. So again, you guys,
Or the eye roll. Couldn't see that.
thank you again for coming and sharing your important information. And I know how important these animals are to you because I get to see you as clients as well. And I think the takeaway there is, and Cindy mentioned it several times, if you're going to get an exotic animal or a non-domestic or non-traditional unusual pet, you should do your homework. And don't rely, even on the little animals that you get at the pet shop, the birds and the reptiles and things. I just don't feel like those are usually minimum wage kids, and they don't usually give you enough information. And so many animals are lost because they're not learning, they're not being managed correctly, and their husband's wrong, and no one was taught. And that's a big problem. So do your homework, and then if you're sure you want to commit to it, look around, talk to people, and make sure it's the right situation for yourself. And then secondly, our other topic on separation anxiety, I think Cindy made it very clear that, again, you have to do things. If your pet does develop this syndrome, it's a tough one to manage, and you got to do it kind of with incremental steps to kind of work back towards a normal animal that can be separated without feeling the threat or the insecurity that drives it to do bad things like bad behaviors. And I think, Cindy, you had a reminder on an event this week.
Mondio Ring.
And what was that again?
Mondio Ring is kind of in a very extended Schutzen. Forgive me, people who really know it, and they're just completely offended by the way I described it. But it's a huge dog event. It's a very athletic competition. It's all day long, Saturday and Sunday, today and tomorrow. And you'll see all kinds of tracking and healing and Schutzen training and dogs that are just amazingly trained. I think it's going to, and outside. It's going to be cool.
Okay. And I think we're going to talk next week. We're going to discuss a topic we call industry opportunities working with pets and other animals. So examples, I mean, your whole business, Paul, is, again, you want to tell people what it's called?
Well, my business, it's a full-service, professional, customized pet care service business. Creature Comforts Great and Small, and my website is creaturecomfortsgreatandsmall.com.
Oh, wow. And that's just one example, but we'll talk about other opportunities in grooming and training and veterinary medicine, veterinary technicians. There's lots of ways to get involved with animals, and there's no shortage of opportunity if you're looking for it. And you understand.
You can go to Texanne's house.
Yes,
And
that's
yes,
true.
you can babysit my babies.
They're great animals. Anyway, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Cindy again, your wonderful co-host and a great friend. Sometimes a little tough, but otherwise great.
Tough
You
love.
need it.
Tough love.
And you can reach Cindy at our office, 314-761-8583, or look at our website, www.clarksonwilsonvet.com. And our clinic number is 636-530-1808. We're there for you if you need help with rescue or adoption or any of your care, especially with not only dogs and cats, but all the exotic animals and non-traditional animals. We're there for you. So thank you very much. We'll see you next week, and hopefully you'll have a great time until then.
Happy Saturday.
Happy Saturday.
Celebration, oh my.